The night was quiet in the small town of Willow Creek, Nebraska. The stars above twinkled brightly and the air carried the faint scent of freshly cut grass. Ethan Carter, a boy just 5 years old, sat on the porch steps of his family's farmhouse. His sandy hair stuck out in all directions, and his blue eyes sparkled with curiosity as he stared up at the sky. He loved nights like this when everything seemed calm and peaceful. His parents were inside, finishing up dinner, but Ethan wanted to stay outside just a little longer. Suddenly, something strange caught his eye. A bright light appeared in the sky, moving faster than anything Ethan had ever seen. It wasn't an airplane or a shooting star. It was something else entirely. The light grew bigger and brighter, almost too bright to look at. Ethan squinted, shielding his eyes with one hand. His heart began to race. What was it? Was it coming closer? Before he could call out to his parents, the light engulfed him. A loud humming sound filled the air, drowning out the chirping crickets and rustling leaves. Ethan felt a strange pull, as if invisible hands were lifting him off the ground. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. Everything around him blurred, the farmhouse, the trees, the fields, and then it all disappeared. When Ethan opened his eyes again, he found himself lying on a cold, smooth surface. The room he was in was unlike anything he'd ever seen. The walls shimmered like water, constantly shifting colors between silver and green. There were no windows, no doors, just glowing symbols floating in the air. He sat up slowly, looking around in confusion. Where was he? What had happened? A figure approached him, tall and slender, with skin that looked like liquid glass. Its body shimmered faintly, and its large almond-shaped eyes glowed softly. Ethan froze, unsure whether to be scared or fascinated. The creature tilted its head, slightly, studying him with an expressionless face. Then, without speaking, it reached out a hand toward Ethan. Ethan flinched but didn't move away. To his surprise, the touch was gentle, almost comforting. In his mind, he heard a voice, not spoken aloud, but clear nonetheless. "You are safe," it said. Ethan blinked in shock. How was it talking to him without opening its mouth? Before he could think about it further, more creatures entered the room surrounding him. They communicated silently among themselves, their thoughts overlapping in a way that made Ethan's head spin. Over time, Ethan learned that these beings called themselves the Valens. They explained, to the best of their ability, that they had taken him because they were curious about humans. Earth was far away from their home planet, and they saw humans as fascinating yet primitive creatures. Ethan didn't fully understand what they meant, but he soon realized that he wouldn't be going back to his family anytime soon. Life among the Valens was strange and lonely. At first, Ethan cried often, missing his parents and the warmth of their hugs. But the Valens showed no emotion, treating him more like an experiment than a person. Still, one of them, a mentor named Kalen, took a particular interest in him. Kalen taught Ethan how to communicate telepathically, introducing him to the Valen language and customs. Though Kalen rarely smiled or did anything resembling human affection, Ethan began to see the alien as a sort of teacher, if not exactly a friend. As the years passed, Ethan grew into a young boy who looked different from the other Valens but moved among them with ease. He wore simple robes made of a material that seemed to change color depending on the light. His meals consisted of strange, gelatinous foods that tasted nothing like the burgers and fries he used to eat at home. Sometimes he would dream of Earth, the smell of fresh hay, the sound of his mother's laughter. But those memories became fuzzier with each passing year. Despite his growing knowledge of Valan culture, Ethan always felt like an outsider. The other young Valens avoided him, whispering behind his back whenever he walked by. Their transparent bodies gave away their emotions even when they tried to hide them, and Ethan could tell they resented his presence. Only Lyra, a younger Valan girl with a kinder disposition, dared to approach him. She was curious about Earth and asked endless questions about what it was like to live there. Through her, Ethan began to feel less alone. One day, while exploring a restricted area of the Valan compound, Ethan stumbled upon a hidden archive. The room was filled with holographic recordings, each showing scenes of Earth. He watched in awe as images of bustling cities, vast oceans, and towering mountains flickered before his eyes. But then he saw something that made his blood run cold, a recording of his own abduction. He watched as the bright light descended from the sky, pulling him away from his home. The Valens weren't just studying humans, they were planning. Something bigger, something sinister. Ethan's chest tightened as realization dawned on him. He had been taken not out of curiosity, but as part of a larger scheme. Anger bubbled inside him, mixing with fear and sadness. For the first time in years, he thought about running away. If the Valens were planning to harm Earth, he had to warn someone. But how could he leave, and where would he go? That night, Ethan confided in Lyra. Her glowing eyes widened as he told her what he'd discovered. "You must escape," she urged, her voice trembling in his mind. "I will help you." Together they began making plans. Lyra smuggled tools and supplies to Ethan, teaching him how to operate basic Valen technology. It wasn't easy. Every step carried the risk of being caught, but Ethan was determined. He couldn't let the Valens destroy his home. Finally, the day came for Ethan to make his move. Under the cover of darkness, he slipped into a small scout ship docked nearby. With Lyra guiding him telepathically, he activated the controls and prepared for launch. Just as the engines roared to life, alarms blared throughout the compound. Guards rushed toward the hangar, their translucent forms glowing with urgency. "Go!" Lyra shouted in his mind. "I'll hold them off." Ethan hesitated, torn between gratitude and guilt. But there was no time to argue. He pressed a button, and the ship shot upward, breaking free of the Valen planet's atmosphere. As he looked back through the viewport, he saw Lyra standing alone amidst the chaos, her form glowing faintly against the dark horizon. Tears streamed down Ethan's face as he realized she might never see him again. For months, Ethan drifted through space, relying on the limited supplies aboard the tiny ship. He plotted a course for Earth, using coordinates he vaguely remembered from the archive. Along the way, he practiced speaking English, trying to recall the words he hadn't used in years. By the time he reached the blue-green orb hanging in the distance, he felt a mix of excitement and dread. What would he find when he returned? Would anyone believe him? Ethan's ship entered Earth's atmosphere, shaking violently as it burned. Through the clouds, he gripped the controls tightly, praying he wouldn't crash. Finally, the ground came into view, a sprawling landscape of mountains and forests. Spotting a clearing near a small town, he guided the ship downward, bracing himself for impact. When the dust settled, Ethan climbed out, his legs wobbling beneath him. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the crisp, familiar air. After so many years, he was finally home. But as he looked around, he knew his journey was far from over. Ethan stood in the middle of a quiet forest clearing, his heart pounding as he took in the sights and sounds of Earth. The air smelled different, richer, fuller than the sterile environment he had grown used to on the Valen planet. Birds chirped overhead, their melodies unfamiliar but soothing. He felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. This was his home, but it no longer felt like it belonged to him. His clothes were torn and dirty from the crash landing, and his body ached from the impact. Still, he forced himself to move forward. The small town he had spotted from above wasn't far away. As he walked through the trees, memories of his childhood came flooding back. Playing outside with his parents, running barefoot through fields, laughing until his sides hurt. But those memories felt distant now, almost like they belonged to someone else. When Ethan finally reached the edge of the town, he hesitated. Everything looked so different, yet strangely familiar. Cars drove down paved roads, people chatted on, sidewalks and shops lined the streets. It all seemed normal, peaceful even. But Ethan knew better. Back on the Valen ship, he had seen recordings of Earth's cities crumbling under alien attacks. If the Valens were planning to invade, this calm wouldn't last long. As he wandered into the town, people turned to stare at him. His appearance, disheveled, pale, and dressed in ragged clothes, drew curious glances. Some whispered to each, while others simply looked away. No one approached him. Ethan felt out of place, an outsider once again. He tried to speak to a man walking by, but his voice cracked, and the words came out awkwardly. "Help," he managed to say, but the man just frowned and hurried off. Feeling defeated, Ethan sat down on a bench near a park. His head spun with thoughts of what to do next. How could he warn these people about the danger coming their way? Would they even believe him if he told them? He didn't have any proof, only fragments of knowledge he'd picked up from the Valans. And how could he explain who he was, a human raised by aliens? Just as Ethan began to lose hope, a woman approached him. She had short brown hair, warm eyes, and wore a white coat that marked her as a nurse. Her name tag read Sarah Miller. She knelt beside him, her expression soft but concerned. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. "You look lost." Ethan stared at her, unsure of what to say. For a moment he considered running away, but something about Sarah's kindness made him stay. I need help," he stammered. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, rough and uneven after years of silence. Sarah nodded slowly, sensing that there was more to his story. "Come with me," she said. Without waiting for a response, she helped him to his feet and led him to her car. Ethan climbed in hesitantly, feeling both relieved and anxious. He didn't know whether to trust her, but he had nowhere else to go. Back at Sarah's house, she gave him food and water, which he devoured hungrily. Then she handed him clean clothes and let him wash up. As Ethan changed, he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror. The reflection startled him. He barely recognized the person staring back. A thin, pale boy with haunted eyes and messy hair. Was this really him? Once he was settled, Sarah sat across from him at the kitchen table. "Can you tell me what happened?" she asked. Her tone was gentle, encouraging. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to organize his jumbled thoughts. He started haltingly, explaining how he had been taken from his home as a child and raised by aliens. He described the Valans, their shimmering bodies, their telepathic communication, their cold detachment. He told her about Lyra, the girl, who had helped him escape, and the recordings he had seen of Earth being targeted for invasion. Sarah listened carefully, her brow furrowing as Ethan spoke. When he finished, there was a long pause. Finally, she said, "That's a lot to take in." Ethan braced himself for disbelief or rejection, but instead, Sarah leaned forward, her gaze steady. "I don't know if I fully understand everything you've been through, but I believe you. You're not lying, I can see it in your eyes." Her words brought tears to Ethan's eyes. For the first time in years, someone believed him. Someone cared. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. Over the next few days, Sarah helped Ethan adjust to life on Earth. She taught him basic things he had forgotten: how to use modern technology, how to talk to people without sounding awkward, how to navigate everyday situations. At first, Ethan struggled. Simple tasks like ordering food at a restaurant or crossing the street felt overwhelming. But Sarah was patient, guiding him step by step. During this time, Ethan also began piecing together clues about the Valans' plans. Using equipment he had salvaged from the scout ship, he built a makeshift device capable of detecting alien signals. Late at night, when Sarah was asleep, he worked tirelessly, scanning the skies for any sign of activity. One evening, his device picked up faint traces of energy patterns unlike anything on Earth. His stomach churned as he realized the Valans were already here, lurking at the edges of the solar system. Ethan showed Sarah the readings, explaining what they meant. "They're preparing to attack," he said urgently. "We don't have much time." Sarah's face paled, but she nodded firmly. "Then we need to tell someone who can do something about it," she replied. The next morning, they drove to the nearest military base. Ethan rehearsed what he would say, trying to sound confident despite his nerves. When they arrived, they were directed to a reception area where a stern-looking officer greeted them. Ethan explained his situation as calmly as he could, describing the Valens and their intentions. But the officer's expression remained skeptical. "Do you have any proof of this?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Ethan shook his head. "No, sir. Just my word and the readings from my device." The officer glanced at the crude gadget in Ethan's hands and sighed. "Look, kid, I appreciate your concern, but we can't act on speculation. If you have solid evidence, bring it to us and we'll look into it." Frustrated, Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder, silencing him. They left the base empty-handed, but Sarah assured him they would find another way. "We'll keep gathering information," she said, "and we'll figure out how to make them listen." Determined to prove his claims, Ethan threw himself into his work. With Sarah's help, he improved his signal detector, refining its ability to track alien movements. They spent hours poring over maps and charts, pinpointing potential entry points for the Valons. Meanwhile, strange events began occurring around the world. Unexplained disappearances, sudden power outages, and eerie lights in the sky. News outlets dismissed them as natural phenomena or hoaxes, but Ethan knew better. The invasion was closer than anyone realized. One night, while monitoring the skies, Ethan detected a massive surge of energy near Montana. He and Sarah rushed to the location, arriving just in time to witness a chilling sight. A group of cattle lay dead in a field, their bodies drained of blood. Circular burn marks scarred the ground nearby. Ethan's stomach twisted as he examined the scene. "This is their work," he murmured. "They're testing us." Sarah shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. "What are we going to do?" she asked quietly. Ethan clenched his fists, resolve hardening in his chest. "We fight back," he said. "If no one else will stand up, then we will." As weeks passed, Ethan and Sarah continued their efforts, determined to expose the truth. They reached out to journalists, scientists, and activists, hoping to find allies. Most dismissed them as conspiracy theorists, but a few listened. Among them was Ryan Dawson, a former soldier turned survivalist who lived off the grid in the mountains. After hearing Ethan's story, Ryan agreed to join their cause. "If what you're saying is true," he said gruffly, "then we're going to need every advantage we can get." Together, the trio began preparing for the inevitable battle. Ryan trained Ethan in combat techniques, teaching him how to handle weapons and strategize under pressure. Sarah focused on gathering medical supplies and setting up safe houses for survivors. Despite the looming threat, Ethan felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since returning to Earth, he felt like he belonged. But as the days ticked by, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Every night he dreamed of Kalen, his Valen mentor, and the recordings of Earth's destruction. He wondered if Kalen still thought of him, if the Valens regretted letting him escape. Most of all, he feared that his warnings would come too. First, one evening, as Ethan and Sarah sat together in her living room, she turned to him with a serious expression. "Ethan," she said softly, "whatever happens next, promise me one thing." He looked at her, puzzled. "What?" "That you won't give up," she said firmly. "No matter how hard things get, you keep fighting. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who doesn't know what's coming." Ethan nodded, meeting her gaze. "I promise," he said. And for the first time in a long time, he truly meant it. The days leading up to the invasion were tense. Ethan, Sarah, and Ryan worked tirelessly, preparing for a battle they weren't sure they could win. They knew the Valens were out there, watching, waiting. Every strange occurrence, power outages, unexplained disappearances, eerie lights in the sky only confirmed their worst fears. Earth was running out of time. Ethan spent most of his nights monitoring the skies with his improved signal detector. The device had become more accurate thanks to Ryan's help, who added parts scavenged from old radios and computers. Together, they mapped out patterns of alien activity, identifying areas where the Valens seemed to focus their attention. It was clear the aliens were testing Earth's defenses, probing for weaknesses before launching their full-scale attack. Sarah, Meanwhile, prepared medical supplies and organized safe houses across Montana. She reached out to friends, family, and local communities, urging them to stockpile food, water, and medicine. At first, many dismissed her warnings as paranoia, but when strange events began affecting their towns, livestock dying mysteriously, crops wilting overnight, they started paying attention. Slowly, people began to trust Sarah and her small group. Ryan took charge of training Ethan in combat. Though Ethan already possessed advanced reflexes and fighting skills learned from the Valens, Ryan taught him how to adapt those abilities to human weapons and tactics. "You're fast," Ryan said one evening as they practiced in the woods. "But speed alone won't save you if you don't know how to aim." He handed Ethan a rifle, showing him how to steady his breathing and focus on the target. Ethan struggled. At first, guns felt foreign in his hands, unlike the sleek energy weapons he'd used during his time with the Valens. But he practiced relentlessly, determined to master them. By the end of each session, his arms ached and his fingers were blistered, but he refused to stop. "I have to be ready," he told Ryan. "If I'm not, people will die." As the weeks passed, Ethan grew stronger, not just physically but emotionally. He still thought about Lyra often, wondering what had happened to her after he escaped. Had she been punished for helping him? Or worse? The guilt weighed heavily on him, but it also fueled his determination. He owed it to her, and to everyone else, to fight back against the Valens. One night, while scanning the skies, Ethan's device picked up something alarming: a massive energy spike near the edge of Earth's atmosphere. He called Sarah and Ryan immediately, and together they drove to a nearby hilltop for a better view. Through binoculars, they saw dozens of bright lights descending rapidly toward the ground. The Valens had arrived. Panic gripped Ethan as he watched the ships touch down in fields and forests miles away. Their sleek, insect-like designs glinted menacingly in the moonlight. Smaller craft darted between them, releasing bursts of blue, light that incinerated everything in their path. Trees burned, animals fled in terror, and the air crackled with energy. It was happening. The invasion had begun. "We need to warn the others," Sarah said urgently, gripping Ethan's arm. Her voice shook, but her eyes were steady. "They'll be looking for us soon." Ryan nodded grimly. "Let's move. We've got supplies hidden in the mountains. If we can get there, we might stand a chance." The trio hurried back to Sarah's car, driving as fast as they dared through dark, winding roads. Behind them, the horizon lit up with flashes of destruction. Explosions echoed in the distance, shaking the earth beneath their feet. Entire towns were being wiped out, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. When they reached the mountain hideout, a remote cabin stocked with food, water, and weapons, they found a small group of survivors already gathered. Word had spread quickly thanks to Sarah's earlier efforts. People huddled together, frightened but resolute. Among them were farmers, teachers, mechanics, and even a few retired soldiers. Ethan recognized some of them from the town where he'd first landed. "We need a plan," Ryan announced, standing in front of the group. His deep voice commanded attention. "The Valens are powerful, but they're not invincible. We hit them hard, hit them fast, and make them regret coming here." Ethan stepped forward, his heart pounding. "I know how they think," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I can help you fight them." The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at him. Some stared in disbelief. Others nodded approvingly. Ethan swallowed hard, forcing himself to continue. "They're smart, but they underestimate us. That's our advantage." Over the next few hours, the group devised a strategy. Using maps and satellite images salvaged from old equipment, they identified key locations where the Valens were concentrating their forces. These included military bases, power plants, and communication hubs, all critical targets for the invaders. Splitting into smaller teams, they planned coordinated attacks designed to disrupt the aliens' operations and buy humanity more time. Ethan insisted on joining one of the teams heading directly into enemy territory. Despite Sarah's protests, he refused to stay behind. "This is my fight," he told her firmly. "I won't sit on the sidelines while everyone else risks their lives." Reluctantly, Sarah agreed, but only after making Ethan promise to stick close to Ryan. "Don't do anything reckless," she warned. "We need you alive." The following morning, the team set out under the cover of darkness. Ethan's group consisted of Ryan, two former soldiers named Jake and Maria, and a mechanic named Alan who had experience with explosives. Armed with rifles, grenades, and improvised devices made from household items, they moved silently through the forest toward a Valen landing site. As they approached, Ethan's stomach churned. The sight before him was horrifying. Rows of alien ships lined up like insects, their glowing hulls pulsating faintly. Swarms of Valans patrolled the area, their translucent bodies shimmering in the pre-dawn light. Bodies of humans lay scattered across the ground, lifeless and broken. Ethan clenched his fists, anger boiling inside him. "Stay focused," Ryan whispered, crouching beside him. "Remember the plan." The team split up, taking positions around the perimeter. Ethan stayed with Ryan, his heart racing as they crept closer to one of the ships. The plan was simple: plant explosives near the vessel's engines, then retreat before detonating them. If successful, the explosion would disable multiple ships and scatter the Valen forces. Ethan's enhanced senses proved invaluable. He could hear the faint hum of the ship's engines and detect subtle movements of the patrolling aliens. Guiding Ryan and the others with hand signals, he led them past guards undetected. Finally, they reached their target, a massive ship towering over them like a metal beast. Working quickly, Alan attached the explosives to the ship's underbelly while the others kept watch. Just as he finished, a loud screech pierced the air. One of the Valans had spotted them. Chaos erupted as the aliens surged forward, firing beams of energy that scorched the ground. "Fall back," Ryan shouted, firing his rifle wildly. Ethan followed, dodging blasts of light as they sprinted toward the trees. Behind them, the ship exploded in a brilliant flash of orange and red, sending shockwaves rippling through the air. Debris rained down, forcing the team to take cover. When the dust settled, Ethan peeked out from behind a tree. Dozens of Valen ships lay in ruins, their once gleaming surfaces twisted and blackened. The remaining aliens regrouped, their glowing forms flickering with agitation. For the first time, Ethan saw uncertainty in their movements. They hadn't expected resistance. "We did it," Jake said breathlessly, grinning despite the chaos around them. But Ethan knew better. This was just the beginning. As the team regrouped in the safety of the forest, Ethan looked back at the burning wreckage. A mix of triumph and sorrow washed over him. They had struck a blow against the invaders, but the cost had been high. Lives had been lost, homes destroyed, and Kalen, the Valen mentor who had raised him, was likely among the attackers. My thought filled Ethan with conflicting emotions. Back at the hideout, the survivors celebrated their victory, however small. Fires crackled in makeshift pits and voices rose in defiant cheers. But Ethan couldn't bring himself to join them. Instead, he sat alone on a rocky ledge overlooking the valley below, staring at the distant glow of destruction. Sarah found him there, sitting cross-legged with his head bowed. She sat beside him without saying a word, offering silent support. After a while, Ethan spoke softly. "I never wanted this," he admitted. "I didn't ask to be taken. I didn't ask to fight. But now I don't have a choice." Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder. "None of us asked for this," she said gently. "But that doesn't mean we can't rise to the challenge. You've already done so much, Ethan. Don't give up now." Ethan nodded slowly, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but he wasn't alone. Together, they would keep fighting for Earth, for humanity, and for the future. The victory at the Valen landing site gave the survivors a glimmer of hope, but it was short-lived. The aliens regrouped quickly, launching even more brutal attacks across the globe. Cities burned, communication networks collapsed, and chaos spread like wildfire. Despite their efforts, Ethan and his team knew they were fighting a losing battle. The Valens had superior technology, overwhelming numbers, and no regard for human life. Ethan struggled with the weight of responsibility, pressing down on him. He had promised to fight back to protect humanity, but every day brought new losses. Friends he had made in the resistance fell in combat. Families were torn apart as people fled their homes, searching for safety that no longer existed. Guilt gnawed at him constantly. Was this all his fault? If he hadn't been taken by the Valens years ago, would Earth have been spared? Sarah noticed the change in him. His once bright eyes grew dull, shadowed by exhaustion and despair. She tried to lift his spirits, reminding him of how much good he had already done. "You're not alone in this," she told him one evening as they sat together near the fire. "We're all here because we believe in what you're doing. Don't carry the burden by yourself." Her words helped, but only a little. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he owed humanity more. More effort, more sacrifice, more victories. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of those who had died. And then there was Kalen, the Valen mentor who had raised him. Ethan wondered if Kalen still thought of him as a student, or now as an enemy. One night, while everyone else slept, Ethan ventured into the woods alone. He needed space to think, to breathe, without the constant pressure of leadership weighing on him. As he walked, he replayed memories of his childhood among the Valans. Lyra's kindness, Kalen's cold logic, the shimmering halls of their homeworld. It all felt so distant now, yet vivid in his mind. He wondered what the Valans truly wanted from Earth. Was it resources, land, or something deeper, something they hadn't revealed? Suddenly, a rustling sound snapped him out of his thoughts. Ethan froze, gripping the rifle slung over his shoulder. Slowly, he turned toward the noise, his heart pounding. A figure emerged from the shadows, a Valan scout. Its translucent body glowed faintly in the moonlight, and its large, almond-shaped eyes locked onto Ethan. For a moment, neither moved. Then, the Valan tilted its head slightly, studying him. In Ethan's mind, a familiar voice echoed, not spoken, aloud but clear and unmistakable. "Ethan Carter," it said. "You are alive." Ethan's stomach churned. It wasn't Kalen's voice, but it was close enough to send shivers down his spine. "What do you want?" he demanded, raising his weapon cautiously. The Valan didn't respond directly. Instead, it stepped closer, its movements smooth and deliberate. "Your resistance is futile," it continued telepathically. "Our mission cannot be stopped. Your species is weak, divided. Surrender, and we may spare some of your kind." Anger surged through Ethan. How dare they call humans weak? They didn't understand the strength of unity, the power of hope. "We won't give up," he shot back. "Not while I'm still breathing." The Valan paused, its glowing form flickering slightly. For a brief moment, Ethan thought he saw something resembling curiosity, or perhaps pity, in its expressionless face. Then, without warning, it lunged forward, extending a long, claw-like appendage. Ethan reacted instinctively, firing his rifle. The bullet struck the Valan's shoulder, causing it to stagger backward. But it recovered almost instantly, advancing, again with terrifying speed. Ethan fired repeatedly, backing away as fast as he could. His shots hit their mark, but the alien seemed unfazed, its injuries healing rapidly before his eyes. Just as Ethan thought he was about to be overwhelmed, a loud shout rang out. Ryan appeared from the trees, wielding a makeshift flamethrower, crafted from a propane tank and a nozzle. With a roar, he unleashed a stream of fire, engulfing the Valan in flames. The creature shrieked, its glowing body dimming as it collapsed to the ground. Panting heavily, Ryan grabbed Ethan's arm. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gruff but concerned. Ethan nodded, though his hands trembled. "Thanks," he managed to say. Together, they dragged the charred remains of the Valan scout into the bushes, ensuring no other aliens would find it. Back at the hideout, Ethan recounted the encounter to Sarah and the others. Everyone listened intently, their expressions tense. "They're getting bolder," Jake said grimly. "Sending scouts means they're planning something big," Ethan agreed. "We need to strike first," he said firmly. If we can disrupt their operations again, maybe we can slow them down. Ryan nodded. I'll gather the teams. We'll hit another landing site tomorrow night. Sarah hesitated, her brow furrowing. It's risky, she said. We barely survived last time. What if they're expecting us? They will be, Ethan admitted. But we don't have a choice. Sitting here waiting for them to attack isn't going to save anyone. Reluctantly, the group prepared for another mission. This time they chose a location farther north, where reports indicated a large concentration of Valen forces. Armed with whatever weapons they could scavenge or improvise, they set out under the cover of darkness. The journey was grueling. Snow blanketed the ground, making travel difficult, and the biting wind cut through their clothes. By the time they reached the target area, their faces were red and raw, their breaths coming out in frosty clouds. Peering through binoculars, Ethan scanned the horizon. Dozens of Valen ships dotted the landscape, their hulls gleaming eerily in the moonlight. Patrols of aliens marched in formation, their glowing forms casting strange shadows on the snow. This is it, Ryan whispered. Let's move. Splitting into smaller groups, they approached cautiously, using the terrain to conceal their movements. Ethan led his team toward a cluster of smaller ships, intending to plant explosives just as they had done before. But as they neared their objective, disaster struck. One of the soldiers tripped on a hidden sensor, triggering an alarm. Bright beams of light shot into the air, illuminating the entire area. Valen swarmed toward them, firing energy blasts that shattered trees and melted snow. Chaos erupted as Ethan and his team scrambled for cover. Bullets flew, grenades exploded, and screams filled the air. Fall back, Ryan shouted, but it was too late. The Valens had surrounded them, cutting off their escape routes. Desperate, Ethan used his enhanced reflexes to dodge incoming attacks, firing blindly as he searched for a way out. Nearby, Maria went down, clutching her leg as blood seeped into the snow. Alan pulled her to safety, dragging her behind a fallen tree. Ethan spotted Jake pinned down by enemy fire, unable to move. Without thinking, he sprinted toward him, dodging blasts and leaping over debris. Reaching his friend, he hauled Jake to his feet and pushed him toward the others. Go, he yelled. I'll hold them off. No, Ryan shouted, grabbing Ethan's arm. We're not leaving you behind. Ethan shook him off, his jaw set. You have to. Protect the others. Before Ryan could argue, Ethan charged forward, drawing the Valen's attention. Using everything he had learned from the aliens themselves, he fought with a ferocity that surprised even himself. He dodged, rolled, and struck with precision, taking down several enemies before they could react. But he couldn't keep it up, forever. As exhaustion set in, Ethan found himself cornered. A group of Valens closed in, their weapons trained on him. Just as he braced for the inevitable, a loud rumble shook the ground. Looking up, he saw a massive explosion rip through the sky, destroying several Valen ships in a cascade of fire and smoke. The aliens hesitated, distracted by the sudden assault. Seizing the opportunity, Ethan ran, rejoining his team as they retreated into the forest. Behind them, the battlefield burned, lighting up the night like a second sunrise. When they finally reached the safety of the hideout, Ethan collapsed onto the ground, his body trembling with fatigue. Sarah rushed to his side, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. You did it, she said softly. You saved them. Ethan shook his head, tears welling in his eyes. No, he whispered. We're still losing. I don't know how much longer we can keep this up. Sarah hugged him tightly, her own voice breaking. Then we'll find a way. Together. Though battered and bruised, the survivors refused to give up. They patched their wounds, repaired their weapons, and planned their next move. Each day brought new challenges, new losses, but also new resolve. Ethan knew the war was far from over, but for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they stood a chance. The days following the failed attack were some of the hardest for Ethan and his team. Though they had managed to destroy several Valen ships, the cost had been high. Maria's leg injury left her unable to fight, and Jake still bore the scars, both physical and emotional, of nearly being captured. The group was smaller now, their numbers dwindling with each battle. Supplies were running low and morale was at an all-time low. Ethan felt the weight of leadership more than ever. Every decision he made seemed to lead to another loss, another sacrifice. He spent hours staring at maps, trying to find a strategy that would turn the tide in humanity's favor, but no matter how hard he thought, the answer eluded him. The Valens were too powerful, too organized. For every step forward, it felt like they took 2 steps back. Sarah tried to keep everyone's spirits up, but even she struggled to stay optimistic. She tended to the wounded, rationed food, and encouraged people to rest when they could. Still, the toll of the war showed on her face. Dark circles under her eyes, lines of worry etched into her forehead. Despite everything, she never stopped believing in Ethan. "You'll figure it out," she told him one evening as they sat by the fire. "You always do." Her faith in him was both comforting and terrifying. Ethan didn't feel like the hero everyone expected him to be. He was just a boy, raised by aliens, fighting a war he hadn't asked for. Yet somehow he had become the glue holding the resistance together. If he faltered, if he gave up, what would happen to everyone else? One night, while everyone else slept, Ethan wandered into the woods alone. He needed time to think, to clear his head. As he walked, memories of his life among the Valens flooded his mind. He thought about Kalen, his mentor, and wondered what the alien would say if he saw him now. Would Kalen still see him as a student, or would he view him as nothing more than an enemy? Lost in thought, Ethan didn't notice the faint hum until it was too late. A Valen patrol appeared from the shadows surrounding him before he could react. Their glowing forms shimmered in the darkness, their weapons trained on him. Ethan raised his hands slowly, his heart pounding. There was no way out this time. "Why do you resist?" one of the Valens asked telepathically, its voice cold and detached. "Your species is inferior. Your efforts are meaningless." Ethan clenched his fists, anger rising within him. "You don't understand humans," he shot back. "We don't give up. We fight for what matters." The Valen tilted its head, studying him curiously. "You are unique," it said. "Raised among us, yet you choose to stand against us. Why?" Before Ethan could respond, another voice interrupted, a familiar one. "Because he knows the truth." Kalen stepped forward, his translucent body glowing faintly. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. It had been years since he'd last seen his mentor, but the sight of him brought back a flood-cold memories. "Kalen," Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. "What are you doing here?" "I have come to offer you a choice," Kalen replied, his tone calm but firm. "Join us, and we will spare Earth. Resist, and your world will burn." Ethan's mind raced. Could he trust Kalen? Was this truly a chance to save humanity, or just another trick? He glanced at the other Valans, their weapons still aimed at him. "And what happens if I join you?" he asked cautiously. "You will serve as an ambassador between our species," Kalen explained. "Together, we can guide humanity toward a new future, one where they coexist peacefully with us." Ethan hesitated. The offer sounded tempting, but he knew better than to believe it. The Valens had already shown their true intentions: destruction, domination, and exploitation. They wouldn't change their ways simply because he agreed to help them. "No," he said finally, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "I won't betray my own kind." Kalen's expression, or what passed for an expression, remained unreadable. "Then you leave me no choice," he said. With a wave of his hand, the other Valens moved closer, ready to strike. But before they could act, a loud explosion rocked the forest. Bright flames erupted behind the aliens, forcing them to scatter. Ryan and a small group of survivors burst onto the scene, firing rifles and throwing grenades. "Ethan, move!" Ryan shouted, grabbing his arm and pulling him to safety. The battle was short but intense. The humans fought with everything they had: taking down several Valens before retreating into the trees. When they finally reached the hideout, Ethan collapsed onto the ground, his chest heaving with exertion. "Thank you," he gasped, looking at Ryan. "If you hadn't shown up..." Ryan shook his head. "Don't thank me yet. We're not done fighting." Over the next few days, Ethan poured all his energy into planning their next move. He realized that hitting the Valens piecemeal wasn't enough. They needed to strike at the heart of their operation. The key lay in infiltrating the mothership, the massive vessel hovering above Earth that served as the aliens' command center. If they could disable it, they might cripple the entire invasion force. The plan was risky, almost suicidal. Only a small team could make the attempt, and there was no guarantee they would succeed. But Ethan knew it was their best, and possibly only chance. He volunteered to lead the mission himself, knowing the risks involved. "I'm the only one who knows how their systems work," he argued when Sarah and Ryan tried to talk him out of it. "If anyone can pull this off, it's me." Reluctantly, they agreed. Together, they assembled a team. Ryan, Jake, now recovered enough to fight, and Alan, whose technical skills would be crucial for navigating the ship. They armed themselves with whatever weapons and tools they could scavenge, including devices Ethan had salvaged from the scout ship he'd used to escape the Valen homeworld. The night of the mission, the air was thick with tension. Everyone gathered around the fire, sharing quiet words of encouragement. Sarah hugged Ethan tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Come back to us," she whispered. "Promise me." "I promise," Ethan said, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. Under the cover of darkness, the team set out, making their way to a hidden Valen outpost, where they hoped to hijack a transport ship. The journey was perilous, filled with narrow escapes and close calls, but eventually they reached their destination and slipped inside undetected. Finding a suitable ship proved easier than expected. Most of the Valens were preoccupied elsewhere, leaving the docking bay lightly guarded. Using his knowledge of alien technology, Ethan disabled the security systems and guided the team aboard a sleek, insect-like craft. Within minutes, they were airborne, ascending rapidly toward the mothership. As they approached the massive vessel, Ethan's stomach churned. The ship loomed ahead of them, its surface bristling with weapons and defenses. "This is it," he said, gripping the controls tightly. "Once we're inside, we won't have much time." The docking process went smoothly, thanks to Ethan's expertise. Once aboard the mothership, the team split up, each member tasked with a specific objective. Ryan and Jake created distractions, drawing the attention of the Valen guards, while Ethan and Alan worked to disable the ship's core systems. Navigating the labyrinthine corridors of the mothership was challenging, but Ethan's familiarity with Valen architecture gave them an edge. They avoided patrols and bypassed security checkpoints, inching closer to their goal with every step. Finally, they reached the central chamber, a vast domed room filled with glowing consoles and pulsating energy cores. "This is it," Alan said, examining the machinery. "If we overload the core, it should take out the whole ship." Ethan nodded, his hands trembling as he input the necessary commands. "Do it," he said. As Alan worked, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Red lights flashed and the hum of approaching footsteps echoed in the distance. "They're coming!" Ethan shouted, raising his weapon. The Valens arrived in force, pouring into the chamber and opening fire. Ethan and Alan fought desperately, buying precious seconds as the countdown to detonation ticked away. Bullets flew, energy blasts scorched the walls, and smoke filled the air. Just as the timer hit 0, Ethan grabbed Alan and dove behind a console. A deafening explosion rocked the ship, sending shockwaves rippling through the metal structure. The energy core imploded, bathing the chamber in blinding light. Ethan shielded, his eyes feeling the heat sear his skin. When the light faded, the room was in ruins, the Valens either dead or incapacitated. "We did it," Alan gasped, coughing from the smoke. "The ship's going down." Ethan nodded grimly. "Let's get out of here." The journey back to Earth was harrowing. The transport ship sustained heavy damage during their escape, forcing them to make emergency repairs mid-flight. By the time they landed near the hideout, dawn was breaking over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The survivors greeted them with cheers and tears, celebrating their victory. But Ethan's joy was tempered by sorrow. He had lost friends, risked everything, and faced enemies he once called family. As he stood among the crowd watching the sun rise, he allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The war wasn't over, not completely, but for the first time, in a long time, hope burned brightly in his heart. The destruction of the Valon mothership marked a turning point in the war, but it wasn't the end. The alien forces were still scattered across Earth, their ships raining fire on cities and towns. Without the command center to coordinate their attacks, the invaders became disorganized, lashing out in random bursts of violence. For humanity, this meant chaos, but also opportunity. Ethan stood at the edge of the hideout's clearing, watching the horizon. Smoke rose from distant forests where battles raged, and the air carried the faint smell of ash. Despite the victory aboard the mothership, he felt no sense of triumph. Too many lives had been lost, too much destroyed. And though the Valons were weaker now, they weren't defeated. Not yet. Sarah approached him quietly, handing him a cup of water. "You should rest," she said softly. Her voice was gentle, but her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. Like everyone else, she had pushed herself to the limit these past weeks. Still, she refused to give up. "We need you strong for what comes next." Ethan nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. He thought about Kalen, his mentor, and the choice he had made aboard the mothership. Had Kalen truly wanted peace, or was it all a lie? Would the Valons ever stop seeing humans as inferior beings to be conquered? These questions haunted him, keeping him awake at night. Ryan joined them a moment later, his face grim. "We've got reports of another landing site," he said. "Looks like the Valons are regrouping. If we hit them now, we might finish this once and for all." Ethan straightened, setting the cup down. "Then let's move." The team prepared quickly, gathering weapons and supplies. This time, more survivors volunteered to join the fight. Word of the mothership's destruction had spread, reigniting hope among those who had nearly given up. Farmers, teachers, mechanics, all pitched in, determined to reclaim their world. Ethan looked at the faces around him and felt a flicker of pride. Humanity wasn't just surviving, it was fighting back. The journey to the landing site was treacherous. The terrain was rugged, littered with debris from previous battles. Alien patrols roamed freely, forcing the group to stay hidden. At one point, they narrowly avoided detection when a Valon scout passed mere feet away. Ethan held his breath, heart pounding until the danger passed. When they finally reached the target area, the sight was overwhelming. Dozens of ships lined the field, their hulls gleaming in the sunlight. Valons moved methodically, loading crates of stolen resources onto transports. Among them, Ethan spotted Kalen. His translucent form shimmered faintly as he directed operations, his movements calm and precise. For a moment, Ethan froze. Seeing Kalen again stirred emotions he didn't want to confront: anger, sadness, betrayal. But there was no time for hesitation. The team split into smaller groups, each tasked with disabling specific ships. Ethan led his group toward a cluster of vessels near the center of the field, knowing they would draw the most attention. As they planted explosives, alarms blared suddenly. The Valons sprang into action, swarming toward the intruders. Chaos erupted as gunfire and energy blasts lit up the battlefield. Ethan fought with everything he had, dodging attacks and striking back with precision. His enhanced reflexes gave him an edge, but even he couldn't keep up forever. Midway through the battle, Kalen appeared, cutting through the chaos like a ghost. His glowing eyes locked onto Ethan, and for a brief moment the two stared at each other. Then Kalen raised his weapon, firing a beam of energy that narrowly missed Ethan's head. "You could have saved us both," Kalen said telepathically, his voice cold and accusing. "Instead, you chose destruction." Ethan steadied himself, raising his rifle. "I chose freedom," he replied, "something you'll never understand." They clashed fiercely, trading blows in a blur of motion. Kalen was fast, his movements fluid and calculated. But Ethan had learned from the best, and he matched his former mentor step for step. Each strike carried the weight of years of resentment, guilt, and loss. Finally, Ethan landed a critical blow, knocking Kalen to the ground. The alien lay still, his body flickering weakly. For a moment, Ethan hesitated, torn between anger and pity. Kalen had raised him, taught him, shaped him into the person he was today. But Kalen had also betrayed him, using him as a pawn in a brutal invasion. "I'm sorry," Ethan whispered, lowering his weapon. He couldn't bring himself to kill his mentor, not even now. Kalen's glowing form dimmed further, his thoughts reaching out one last time. "You may win this battle, Ethan Carter," he said faintly, "but the cost will haunt you." Before Ethan could respond, Kalen dissolved into light, disappearing completely. A wave of sorrow washed over him, but there was no time to grieve. The battle raged on, and the explosives were set to detonate any second. "Ethan, fall back," Ryan shouted from nearby. Together they sprinted toward the tree line, dodging blasts and debris. Behind them, the ships exploded in a chain reaction, sending shockwaves rippling through the air. The ground shook violently, knocking several Valans off their feet. When the dust settled, silence fell over the battlefield. The remaining aliens retreating to whatever ship still functioned. Ethan watched them go, his chest heaving with exertion. It was over, for now. Back at the hideout, the survivors celebrated cautiously. Fires crackled in the night and voices rose in quiet cheers. People hugged each other tightly, tears streaming down their faces. They had fought against impossible odds and won, at least for today. Ethan sat apart from the crowd, staring at the stars. Sarah joined him after a while, sitting close enough to share warmth. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, she broke the silence. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. "We rebuild," he said, "and we prepare. The Valans might come back someday. We can't let our guard down." Sarah nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. "You've done so much already," she murmured. "Don't forget to take care of yourself, too." Ethan smiled faintly, feeling a small measure of peace. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but he wasn't alone. Together they would honor the sacrifices made and build a better future. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. In the days that followed, Ethan became a symbol of hope for the survivors. He traveled to different communities, sharing stories of resilience and courage. He encouraged people to work together, to support one another, to never lose faith. Though he carried the scars of war, both visible and invisible, he refused to let them define him. One evening, as he stood before a crowd of survivors, gathered around a bonfire, Ethan spoke plainly but with conviction. "We've been through hell," he began. "We've lost friends, family, homes. But we're still here. That means something. As long as we stand together, we can overcome anything." His words resonated deeply, igniting a spark of determination in everyone who heard them. Slowly but surely, life began to return to normal, or as close to normal as it could be after such devastation. Crops were replanted, buildings repaired, and bonds strengthened. Years later, when the scars of war had begun to fade, Ethan found himself standing in a quiet field, looking up at the stars. He often came here to think, to remember. Lyra, Kalen, the countless lives lost, it all weighed heavily on him. But he also remembered the bravery of ordinary people who had risen to extraordinary challenges. Their legacy lived on in every rebuilt home, every child born into a safer world. Sarah joined him then, placing a hand on his arm. "You did good, Ethan," she said simply. He smiled, squeezing her hand. "We did good." And for the first time in a very long time, Ethan felt at peace.